start to brighten other people's world with a smile, all of a sudden the world brightens up around you. It's like reciprocal. It's so interesting. And it's something in psychology that I don't want to talk about more because I don't have the studies in front of me, but it's something about us having a good attitude and keeping a good attitude around the people that we are having or around with that makes us so much better at whatever we want to do. Let's stop fighting beliefs. Stop fighting beliefs and let's try to find common ground. We're all on this planet together. According to statistics, it's the person who's mediocre that actually advances further. But is racism the reason the crime rates are so high? I can't say that. You know, that's a tough question. I don't think it's racism. The crime rates are going to be so high. I'm going to be honest with you. Actually, I can't answer that. It's human nature. And I'm being truthful about where we're going right now. We're not going in the right direction. We're not going in the right direction to heal and mend this country. Anyway, you know what time it is, folks. That's right. It's time for more In the Hot Box with Doc Reo. And today we're here talking about, you guessed it, self-efficacy versus self-confidence. This episode is the second episode in the self-efficacy versus self-confidence series, and it is called Mindset to Retrieve. Mindset to Retrieve. That's right. So this particular series, well, why don't I just jump into it instead of explaining anything else? All right, here we go. Since the last time, I didn't really say the definition, but self-efficacy is a person's belief in their ability to succeed in a particular situation, and self-confidence is an attitude about your skills and abilities. It takes both to grow a mindset to believe, or growth mindset to retrieve. You see what I mean? Because they're both together. If you're going to believe, you're going to retrieve. And like I said before, it's cyclical. So it takes both to grow a mindset to believe, and it takes both to grow a mindset to retrieve. That's right. Today I'm having one of these Great Space Coaster days. When I was a kid, I used to watch that show, The Great Space Coaster, and it was something about that show that always drove me to it. It seemed like they always had a mission. They always had a mission that they wanted to accomplish, or a mission that they wanted to get into. And as you see, the cap that I flipped up from that other camera was in the way. But it seemed like they always had some kind of mission, and they always had a problem that they wanted to solve. And so I want you to think about when you're watching TV, or when you have watched TV and you've seen things on TV and you've seen an episode go from its beginning to its end. And usually they start out the beginning of the episode with a problem or dilemma. And by the end of the episode, they either finish it or they extend it to a new episode and say it's going to be continued so they can finish the dilemma on the next episode. So I just want you to have that in mind when you think about retrieval and you think about this whole process of going from or changing your mindset and understanding how you can use self-efficacy and self-confidence to gain and to complete your goals and to reach and achieve success. Let's jump into a little bit about human nature. All right. That's right. Nature and people will do what they do, but it's up to each of us to make it through. Now, I wrote this docism. I don't even know when I wrote this docism. Another one that it's in my docism list. I tend to write them and then I start putting them down. I'm trying to get to 301 docisms, and then I'm probably going to go to 501. Right now I'm at 280 something. So I'm always coming up with new quotes that help me carry on and move to the next level. And so this one is something about the retrieval process. And understanding in the retrieval process, you're going to run into haters. You're going to run into things that don't exactly go your way. Like even today, I had some complications getting ready for this. Things didn't go exactly my way. So I ran into complications. Of course, that's just the way it works. That's just the way life works. And since life works that way. Well, progression works that way. So understand and remember that when you take this travel, don't worry about the haters have to say. Don't worry about the people that love you and care about you have to say when they're hating on you too. Don't worry about the situations that get in your way, the obstacles that you can overcome. Because nature and people will do what they do. But it's up to us to make it through. It's up to each of us to make it through. All right? So let's get to the nitty gritty. In this video, what will you learn? What will you learn in this video? You will learn how to recognize and retrieve talents, how to utilize the memory retrieval process, and how to avoid retrieval conflicts. But also, we're going to go through one more time, who am I and why am I here? All right. I'm a scholar with 5 degrees. Yes, I have degrees in social behavioral sciences, arts and humanities, film, television, and electronic media, journalism, and that one's so long I always forget it, and electronic media management. I'm working on more, but I started as a professional musician right here at 32nd Street, USC, Magnet School for Visual and Performing Arts. And yeah, that's me, that little kid playing a cornet instead of a trumpet because I was too small to play a trumpet because my hands didn't fit around it. That's me. And I was a paid professional musician before junior high school. Yeah. Then I was a veteran in the United States Army. Yes, I was a veteran in the United States Army. I am a veteran. I don't know why I keep saying I was. I was in the United States Army. That makes me a veteran in the United States Army. But also, I'm a producer. I'm a broadcast journalist. I've done them both. Film and television. Music videos, press kits. A lot of stuff I produce. Even to program director in journalism. So, with that being said, let's get into the lesson a little bit deeper here. All right? Retrieve choices. As I said before, you're going to learn. What are you going to learn in this lesson? You're going to learn how to recognize and retrieve talents. Retrieving talents comes from the ability to retrieve choices. We all have choices. For as long as you live, you have choices. And anything you do is your choice. Don't let anybody else tell you that you do it because they want you to do it, or don't do it because someone else wants you to do it. Do it because you want to do it. Make your choice. Make your stand. That is the number one thing about believing to retrieve. In order for you to retrieve, you got to do it for yourself first so that you can do it for other people. So that you got to be in that one eye in community before you can commune. So you got to know yourself. And in knowing yourself, there's a few things that I want to talk about here when it comes to knowing yourself. All right. Now, each of us were created from the same stardust, right? We're all created from atoms. Everything in this universe is created from atoms. And it's from the same creator or the higher power, whichever you want to call it. If you believe in God, Allah, Buddha, whatever higher power you believe in. Right? Whether if you just think it's just a universe or just science as it is. The atom is that core part of that. And part of the atom being that core part of it, it makes me ask you this. What do you know? You see, everything we know comes from what was already set out within us to become. Each atom became something, whether it became a table, whether it became a rock, whether it became a chair, whether it became an amoeba. It became something and divided to become something more. So, if that's the case, how did an atom do that? What are atoms? They are part of energy. And as Einstein said, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change from one form to another. Now, a lot of people talk about this all the time. They talk about, there's nothing new under the sun. Because there isn't. Everything was created from the same stuff. The same stardust that created the universe is still spreading and expanding and growing, the same atoms, the same energy. It's just transforming to become something else. And each of us have that energy within us. Each of us have that ability to transform within us, right? Right? So, what do we need to transform? Well, I like to say we need a little atomic action, right? We need those atoms to move. We need that energy to keep moving. Now, the Oxford Dictionary says that defines atomic action as an individual sequence of primitive operations that must complete without interruption or can be considered as instantaneous. Wow, whoa, hold on. If atomic action is instantaneous, then I should be able to run across the street right now without thinking and come right back. And you'll never miss me going, right? Right? Well, let's taper that down just a little bit, all right? Because I do believe that atomic action is instantaneous. All right? What am I saying with all this? All right? Let's talk about physical. Because what we think through atomic action and visualize, what we think and visualize can manifest itself in physical form. This is true. This is what we know. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the iPhone. We wouldn't have, from tricorder to iPhone. It was a manifestation in physical form. That's exactly what we've been doing throughout time, throughout years. Even Henry Ford. Henry Ford manifested the creation of the automobile, a mass production, not the creation of the automobile, the mass production of the automobile. That was Ford's greatest achievement. Not creating the Model T, but creating the Model T in mass production so that you can pump out several Model Ts in a factory. And everybody can get the same quality material at once, right? So it is that transformation, just like Edison. It's that transformation of him taking the time to go through thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of failures to manifest that tungsten bulb in the physical form. To get those two filaments to sit right next to each other and conduct that energy, that old energy that's been here since the universe began, that's never changed, conducting that energy into two filaments that conducted energy between each other and created light. Now today, we're way past that. We're in LED bulbs now. LED bulbs are something totally more complex. It's like the difference between Philo Farnsworth, who created the television that's not supposed to exist, the tube television that's not supposed to exist. Remember that old click, 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 click TV, the big old TVs? For those of y'all who are old enough to remember, some of y'all are not old enough to actually remember until you see it in books or see it in history stories. But the fact that the TV, the old tube TV, shouldn't have ever existed. It was also created from the same stardust, the same atomic action, the same physical form that we take and create and visualize to make things happen. People told Philo Farnsworth, what you're trying to do is impossible. They told him that over and over and over and over again, but yet and still we all have TVs today, don't we? Not made out of the same technology that Philo created. However, it is advanced. It has become more. It has become even much more when we talk about computers. So, manifestation, I think manifestation starts instantly. You know what I mean? People talk about this all the time, but manifestation, it literally starts instantly. And what do I mean by that? Because as soon as we think it, our mind starts to go into a process of trying to figure out, trying to retrieve the information we need, trying to grab that information, pull it in. What can we do to make it happen? That's part of atomic action. You see? But manifestation, although it starts instantly, as soon as we think it's so, it takes a little bit more to go with. All right? Now, let me rewind and let me explain that a little bit more, because I want to take this back to belief again. And I want to take this back to the creation of the universe. And I want to take this back to higher power. And the reason why I'm taking this back to higher power, because I think a lot of people can understand this. Many of us spend time in our lives doing what? Doing what? On maybe a daily basis, or maybe a Sunday basis, or maybe a Saturday basis, or maybe, depending on what culture or where you're from, some people do it on a daily basis. What do we do on a daily basis because of faith and belief? Well, we pray. Prayer. It's a powerful tool that we have, right? Those who understand how it works know that it works. Am I right? Prayer works. No matter what culture you are in. You who know it to work, know it work. Now, let's step back, because I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people in the world that don't believe in prayer. They don't believe it work. I can understand that. I can understand why people believe it doesn't work. You know? And I think thought and prayer are similar. You see, because the misconception about prayer or praying is this. If we pray, we must take action. That's the misconception with prayer. So we must pray and then take action as if we received. One more time. We must pray and take action as if we received what we prayed for. That's part of belief. Now, let's back that up, because a lot of people will be like, oh man, now he's getting all religious and stuff. No. Let's take it back to thought. Let's move religion out of you for just a second. I don't want to offend anyone who's religious, but I gotta open this up to everybody. Okay? If we are to understand the power of belief and how to retrieve things through belief, then we need to understand that thought is just as powerful as an atom. Because thoughts and atoms have one thing in common. Energy. Energy that never dies, that cannot be created, that can only change. And that energy continues to travel within us, through us, into other objects that we create, in and through other people that we commune with. Energy continues to travel, and thought is part of that energy, because thought comes from what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we understand, and what we know. It's all part of energy, and it's all based on the physical effects of an atom. An atom that created our brain, that fires these electrons, that fires these pulses, that fires these sensations through our mind. Through prayer, we start to gain a form of diligence. And diligence is what it takes for us to gain persistence. We have to keep doing something and keep practicing something and doing something over and over and over again and become persistent at it before we get to the next step. And the persistent person will always give themselves a backup plan. I call that listening to God's answer, or listening to the universe, or paying attention to the effects of, what law was that? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Right? Isaac Newton, right? Am I right? I tend to forget things, so I gotta ask that question. But the law of physics, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So, if that's the case, then diligence and persistence allow us to start building things so that we pay attention to the effects of those things. We pay attention to whether or not it's working or it's not working. I was watching somebody the other day, and I wish I had the Hacksmith Industries. Hacksmith Industries bought an Iron Man mask. They bought 3 of them, actually. And they took Hacksmith Industries on YouTube. They took one of the Iron Man masks, and the I forgot what version it was. You'd think I know this stuff, but it's the older Iron mask, the steel Iron Man mask, and he put a camera eye in it. And in the camera eye, he also made it so it was an infrared camera. He made it so that it can change and do different things. He also made it so you can use a remote control to change it, and you could also play Minecraft on it. But not just that. That camera, when you put on the mask, was like a Google Eye, a Google Glass. You had an eyepiece in it that you could see everything. So when you were wearing the mask, you weren't just looking through the mask trying to play a game. You were actually looking in that little camera, looking in that little screen, and either seeing the camera on, Minecraft, or you could also, with your other eye, see through the other eye of the mask. Plus it had night vision, plus it had IR. So you could take an IR flashlight and scan it. But if you want to check that out, go ahead and check that out on YouTube. It's Hacksmith Industries, and it's the metal Iron Man helmet with display. That's the metal Iron Man helmet with display. Hacksmith Industries. But we were talking about persistence. And the thing about it is, he was persistent enough to keep figuring out how to make things happen. And in the process, he over and over again, he was trying to make it work, and he kept having issues every time he tried to make it work. So you'll hear him somewhere in the end of the video go, how many times I say that? And he'll play clips of him saying, it worked, it worked, it worked, it worked, it worked. That's because he's checking. He's evaluating his progress as he goes through it to make sure that what he's doing is working, and paying attention that if it doesn't work, then he's got another problem. And if he's got a problem, he's got to figure out a way to fix it. He's got to go back and retrieve whatever information he can to figure out to make it work. And listening, that's part of listening. So listening is not only listening to other people, but it's also listening to your senses, listening to the things that are going around you, being aware. That way, if your answer is a no, you still get an answer because you're listening. If it doesn't work, if it fails, then okay, I got an answer. I got to figure out how to fix it, right? Don't just listen with your eyes. That's my tip to you. Don't just listen with your eyes. Listen, observe, examine, experience. Be aware. Got to be involved to be aware. And that takes a little bit of planning. If you want to stay aware, you got to plan to stay aware. You got to be ahead of the game. And in order to be ahead of the game, you got to be constantly seeking. Constantly seeking. Right? Seeking answers. And if you're seeking answers, you're creating clear and concise workflows. Right? You're creating a way so you can seek answers easier and do things easier. But you're also creating clear and concise personal management systems. Because it's not just about creating your workflow, but we got to manage our own behavior. We got to manage those instantaneous doubts that we get. We got to go back to the first lesson in belief and remember that belief comes with us remembering that we can do it, that we can achieve it, that we can move forward, that we can grow on. It's all about managing ourselves and managing our environment. Personal systems as well as workflow systems, right? And then we got to, in those systems, in order to create those systems, we got to do what? We got to have some research behind it. Consistently seeking answers while strengthening faith in ourselves and in our abilities. That's the only way we can keep making that step to self-efficacy. Consistently strengthening our faith, our self-confidence, consistently strengthening our self-confidence And then doing things with our self-confidence that show us that we have that we can be self-efficient, that we can actually make things happen, that we can actually do what we're seeking. Telling ourselves, yeah, it works. Oh, yeah, it works. It motivates us. It keeps us going. It keeps us going strong. And so research helps us find out if things are working or find out answers. Because when we find out answers, we say, oh, I can do this. You know, the other day I was making something. I wanted to create my own cookie dough. And, you know, I created my own recipe for cookie dough. And while I was creating my own recipe, I screwed up a couple of times. And I found out what the problem was. The real problem is that instead of using baking soda, I was using baking powder, and I needed to be using baking soda. Now I can use both baking soda and baking powder, but because baking is a science, they do two different things. So I'm not that good at science, but I do know a little bit about it, and I figured it out. I took that information that I researched, and I went back and added baking soda to my, to my mix, and voila, came out with great cookies. Great homemade recipe. I love it. I did a couple of tweaks, but I did it all off the top of my head, except for I had to look up the baking soda. Just because I remembered what was in things from reading packages. You see? So that self-confidence took me from what I knew from the packages, what I researched, took me to the next level to understand that I can make this. Well, let's see if I can make it. Oh, I failed. I started listening. As I was listening, I started tweaking things and looking and researching and planning and trying to figure it out. And as I planned and went through using my atomic action to generate this idea that I had into physical form and meditate on the idea and know that I could do it from the meditation, I was able to take it to the next level and create something. And that's just something as simple as baking. But we could do that with anything. We could do that with anything. But in order to do that, we got to remember that it takes belief to retrieve what we need to achieve to succeed. One more time, because I was looking at myself over here. It takes belief to retrieve the tools we need to achieve the goals that we need to succeed. So, got to remember these 4 pillars. And I think it's important because when we look at the 4 pillars, remember this. You might be believing over here, and then when you're over here believing, you take that trip and you get over here to retrieval, you start running into haters. Haters telling you can't do it. Haters telling you you don't know what you're doing. You don't have the right skills, or it's impossible. And so you have to go back to belief to strengthen that ability to retrieve. And every time you might keep going back and forth between these two. But when you go back and forth between these two, when you take that step to climb, you start to build more tools. You start to build more strength. You start to listen more. You start to see how you can make it through obstacles, and you start to retrieve more ability to achieve. But we're not at achieving yet, because part of retrieval comes with you working your memory. We got to work on memory, but not just memory in the way you think it. Now, let me help you understand. Let me give you a little context about memory, because there are 3 types of memory, right? There's sensory memory, right? And sensory memory is, well, it's brief, it's small, it's short term. It's actually less than a quarter second long. Now, I know some of you are probably looking at this video and some of the things that I've said already, you've already forgotten. It's gone in one ear and out the other. That's what we call that. When I was a kid, as a matter of fact, still to this day, if I don't stop myself and think about it and do some name association or something, a name will go in one ear while I'm talking with somebody and go right out the other. That's that brief, that sensory memory. It happens all the time to all of us. But the weirdest thing about sensory memory is it actually has a large capacity. Sensory memory may have a brief duration, but it has a large capacity because we take in a lot of things from outside. We're consistently always taking in things. I mean, if you've looked at television lately, you can watch CNN. You watch CNN lately, how many things are on that screen? And we start to zone things out. We start to get in our focus areas. But if you watch a CNN news broadcast, you could have cognitive overload, cognitive overload is when your mind, there's too much going on in your head, and you have so much going on in your head that you can't think straight, or you can't concentrate, or you can't, which is thinking straight, or you can't get things done that you want to get done because you're overloaded. And we all get overloaded. Cognitive overload can do that. And so let me not overload you too much, and let's keep going and talk more about sensory memory, because it deals with your senses, your visual, your auditory, and your kinesthetic senses. Yes, it deals with all three senses: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Because what you see, what you hear, and what you sense through feeling and movement all have value. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm moving my mouse, and I had something over by my mouse, and it just was annoying me. It was actually causing me cognitive load or cognitive overload because I couldn't get my mouse to move the way I wanted to move it. It was too much. And it was just, all I had to do was move one thing out of the way. And once I moved that one thing out of the way, my body relaxed, my mind relaxed, my whole energy relaxed enough so that I can get it done. So with that, let's go to the next side of memory. Since we know what the short-term memory is, and we all know we all have short-term memory when it comes to certain things, what's the other memory? What's the memory that helps us associate things? I call it the working memory. Unfortunately, the working memory is short. I mean, actually, I don't call it that. It is the working memory. The working memory is short. It's very short. You would think it would be longer than the sensory memory, but I mean, you would think it would not. It is longer than the sensory memory, actually. It's less than a half a minute, but it's still short. It's not real brief. It's not quick. It's not instant, but it is part of the short-term memory system. All right. Now, even though it's short, it has a small capacity. But it is what we take in. And that's the reason why when I was saying that before, that when somebody tells me a name, it can go in my ear and go out the other, is because my working memory is working on another thought already, because I'm sensing kinesthetic. I'm using my sensory memory, and I've gotten something else from them. Their name, unfortunately, is less important to me than they are, which is interesting because I'm reading more about what I'm getting off of them visually, what I'm getting off of them auditorily, and what I'm sensing off of them kinesthetically, of their body language. And so that becomes more important. That becomes the forefront in my head. And because my working memory is so small, I can't concentrate on all that at once. And so the name goes in and goes right back out. And it takes that working memory for me to grab that real quick so that I don't forget. Because a working memory, you either forget, associate. You either associate and forget, because it is small. You can associate something and still forget it. I know some people's names I associate, and then I see them later. I was like, what was your name again? Oh, yeah, I was right. But I wasn't sure. Or I may have had 3 or 4 names in my head. Or you can associate to store it. And you store it in your long-term memory. Now let's talk about long-term memory. Because a long-term memory is, as it says, long. And it goes for many years. I know a lot of people think, oh yeah, I just forget all the time. And anything you've learned and you stored in your long-term memory can be there forever. Can be there forever because your long-term memory is large. And so I was under the impression that my brain was getting full and I was forgetting things of the past. And just the other day, I was trying to think of something. And I was like, oh man, it's going to be too difficult for me to think of. I just cannot remember it. And it's My battle buddy. As a matter of fact, I was trying to remember my battle buddy from Basic Training's name, and I can't remember it for some reason. I think his first name is Brandon, but I can't remember his last name. And I was like, that's going to be too difficult. I can't remember half the people in Basic Training. I remember one name in Basic Training. That's it. Two. And the only reason why I remember the other one is because he was in my unit after Basic Training. And it's in there. I've known it. I trained with this guy. I trained with all those guys. And so I know their names. It's in there. It's stored in my long-term memory. However, because the long-term memory lasts many years, and the storage capacity is large, it makes it harder for me to retrieve the information. And so it gets packed in there with other stuff that I put in my long-term memory. It's not that it seeps out, you lose it. It's still there. And so memory is powerful that way. And that's important to understand, that memory is, our long-term memory is there forever. It just takes us more effort to retrieve it. And if our memory is there forever, it takes us more effort to recall things. And in order for us to recall those things, what do we need to do? We got to practice it. Practicing anything gives us the ability to recall it. So let's say you have a talent that you remember when you were a kid, right? And you remember doing something, you were like, yeah, I wanted to be this when I grow up. Because when we were children, we actually knew what we wanted to be. We knew our path. We knew where we wanted to go. But as we dealt with the haters and climbed that ladder and went through that process, we ran into all these retrieval conflicts, right? And these retrieval conflicts sent us back, and most of us didn't go back to belief. We went off to disbelief, or we went off to depression, or we went off to other things and changed our voyage. Thought of something else, or we went off to what somebody else told us. Hey, you need to be a doctor or a lawyer in order to make money in this world. I remember growing up and hearing that all the time. A musician doesn't make anything, even though I was already making money as a child. People were telling me, you need to find a job that you can do forever, because you won't make it forever as a musician. Well, it's right. I didn't make it forever as a musician. I became something more because I believed, and I went on to other goals that I believed in. And I took another step and completed more goals before I was out of high school. I keep saying that. I completed most of the dreams that I had before I left high school. So everything else after that is kind of a bonus, because I didn't think I was going to live past 21 anyway. It's just the reality I grew up in, and going into the military, I really didn't think I'd live past 21. But, it takes us recalling things. And like I said earlier, in order for us to recall those things, to recall that past, to recall those names that I wanted to recall, to remember those things from the past and be able to retrieve without running into those conflicts, it takes work. It takes work. I'm telling you, it takes work. And that work, as I told you, is not that easy to always figure out what we want and how to get what we want. Sometimes we struggle. Sometimes we have obstacles or challenges in the way. Sometimes we lose faith in ourselves and the people around us. Sometimes we succeed. And when we succeed, that means we sit down and we work through those steps to get there. We dealt with the things that it took for us, the tedium that it took us to get to the next level. We did the work to make it to the next level. And with that being said, what are some of the ways that we avoid those retrieval conflicts? I like this animation because that thought. Think. What are some of the ways that we avoid retrieval conflicts? Think about that for a second. When you do something, when you set out to do a project, and you get ready to start it and get it over with, what are some of the ways you do, what are some of the things you do to avoid retrieval conflicts? We look at our skills. I say we look at our skills. We look at what we know, what we already know. Like, for instance, I say we look at the skills that we know that we've learned and how we use them and how we succeeded and failed. And in that, we ask, what are the risks, right? Because if we're going to sit back and use our knowledge, or let me put it this way, our knowledge and skills help us to identify risk and avoid failures. Think about it for a second. Whatever we practice, we start to get to a groove of it. We build a workflow. We build that personal management system, and we got everything lined up the way we want it, and we got that flow going. We in the groove, right? And so we can see a problem coming when we're in the groove, just because we're in sync. We're in the zone. When we're in the zone, sometimes we get tripped up in the zone too. But we might still see the problem coming in advance because we've practiced, we've gotten to that point. We've built things up and gotten to the zone. You see, as long as we listen to our own experience and open to learning new information, then we'll remember that there's always a gap and that it's up to us to fill that gap. Because retrieving is about learning. I was just thinking something. Actually, I am going to jump into that. And here's another learning term that I think will help you avoid retrieval conflicts. I think it will. I was just thinking about that. Here's another learning term that I've recently picked up. Actually, I saw it before, but I didn't know the definition until I got this class, and I had to dig back. I actually reread it like 15, 16 different times last semester. And this retrieval term is called, or this learning term is called zone of proximal development. All right. The zone of proximal development is that gap between what we know and what we don't know. All right. It's simple as that. It's that learning gap. You know what I mean? And it may be skills that may be too difficult for us to master or that take time. That's the level of difficulty for us to master, to get to where the things we don't know. So a lot of times in retrieval, we get caught in that zone of proximal development and we fall back and we don't go any further. But it's that persistence and diligence that we use to push us through and figure out whatever time it takes. Like I said in the last lesson, what did I say in the last lesson? That first believe, what do we got to figure out? You got to figure out your next steps. Your next steps is to figure out what do you want, meaning who you are and why you want it. I mean, you are who you are, but why you want what you want. When do you want it? You got to figure out a feasible time frame, and what you need to get it, the learning you need to get it, and where you're going to get that learning. So sometimes the zone of proximal development may be location. We might not be in the right location to get the information. We might need to go to another location. We might actually, the location could just be on the computer. Could be a website. Could be a journal. Could be a book, like Applying the Science of Learning by Richard E. Mayer. Could be all kind of things, right? Right? But it's retrieval for us to look for the skills that are difficult. And what do you need to get it? Like I said before, what do you need to get it is in a location. So it has to do with what and where you need to get it. And so you're going to need those skills that you already have to get through it. And you're going to need also something else. You can't make it through the zone of proximal development without guidance. You can't make it through the zone of proximal development without encouragement. You can't make it through the zone of proximal development without the knowledge you seek. You're going to need those three things. But I want you to also remember, when you're working through the zone of proximal development, remember the first lesson again. Go back to the first lesson. Let's just go back there for a second with the inverted Maslowian pyramid. You see, I want you to remember that self-actualization is the bottom. It's not physiological needs. Wipe that out of your head. Wipe out your safety needs out of your heads. Take the risk, because the risk is thought first. Think about it, and think about it without risk. Think about how you can get there without the risk, and start planning and believing in that thought. Start taking the steps, even if it takes years to get those steps in place. You got to make those goals, whether they be weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, annually, 5 years, 10 years. You got to meet those goals. Meet them by self-actualizing first. And like I said before, actually Fran Farone, which I still haven't found the actual saying of her name yet, said starting at the bottom mitigates the dream, starting at the top raises the performance bar. That means you perform better when you start at the top. When we start at the bottom, we're clouded with the weight. When we start at the top, it's easier to walk down. Isn't it more challenging to walk upstairs than it is to walk down the stairs? So start at the top. Be that all-seeing eye. Observe, listen, look, experience, stay aware. And once you do those things, you can walk down the pyramid cruising, saying what's up to everybody, because everybody knows you because you're on top. Remember that, because it gives you that growth mindset to retrieve. It also allows you to believe that the dream is possible. Because when we believe that the dream is possible, we work to achieve it. And as I said before, when we were a little kid, we already knew what we wanted. We already know where we want to go. We already know what our desires are calling for us. We already know who we really are. We just have to stop lying to ourselves. And I'm saying lying to ourselves. Because some of us, I feel like I'm doing what I wanted. I've already completed my goals. So even when I lied to myself, I was completing my goals. Because in the back of my head, I knew what I wanted and I would go after it. I have my mom's wife says, you always want to do it your way. Hey, Frankie taught me, I did it my way. You know, it's not necessarily my way, but it's what I felt was right. You see, why go against the grain when the grain in me already has the right flow? It's harder to swim against the current than it is to swim with the current. And I know plenty of us spend a lot of time, especially this year. We're in the midst of a lot of going against the current because we got a lot of things going on either side of the fence. I don't care what side of the fence you are on. This is not about whether or not you're conservative or liberal or progressive or independent or right wing or left wing or none of that. This is all about community. It's all about what it takes for us to believe in ourselves so that we can be successful in our community and leave a legacy that is worthwhile. Leave a legacy that helps others, helps our children, our children's children, helps our family members, our community members, helps our world be better. Because that's what we're striving to. We're all striving to be better, right? At least I hope we are. And if we do that, we will create dreams for the needs of our community. We will. So, I want you to maximize your potential. And here's a quote I wrote. It's not a docism, it's just a quote I wrote. Doesn't go in the Docism pack. Gamification, scaffolding, and the zone of proximal development maximize our potential to recognize and effectively act when opportunity arises. Now, let me back up here. Gamification, that's taking game elements and adding them to your work environment, to your study environment, to whatever environment you are using, the tools. So instead of it being work that is tedious, and instead of having a tough time at whatever we want to do, we can add game elements to it and make it more fun. Remember I said in the last lesson, I'm all about making it more fun. So the first thing I said, gamification. Now, how do we make it better? Making it better means we take it one stage at a time. We scaffold it. And digging deeper. The zone of proximal development means that we're scaffolding the areas that we need to learn or need to know or need to find or need to grasp so that we can get to what we don't know. You see what I mean? We're scaffolding the areas we need to change and build upon. We're just taking it one step at a time, taking it in chunks. Don't do it all at once. That's why I said, if it takes 10 years, if it takes 5 years, if it takes 1 year, set up small goals, set up workflows and personal management systems that help you get to that goal in that time. That's how we retrieve. That's how we maximize our potential to retrieve. And when we maximize our potential to retrieve, we're just like those firefighters. We're just like those firefighters. All right? I put it to you this way. And the reason why I put the firefighter photo on there is because I thought it was important to put the fire photo on there because I remember a time when I just got out of the military and I was in Georgia and they opened up firefighter training or the ability to audition. It was kind of an audition, but you were kind of going through the process of becoming a firefighter. And they had a firefighter training camp. And it wasn't really a training camp. It was more of like I said, it was an audition. And so it was an obstacle course and they had all these different things that you had to go through. But in the process of going through that training, there was one obstacle called barrel rolling. And a lot of people failed at the barrel rolling. And it's not that they failed at it. It's just because after barrel rolling, they got so sick they just couldn't take it anymore. But it was an obstacle. But part of that obstacle is part of the training. And see, that training, for me, it was like military training. Military training prepared us for obstacles so that we could take advantage of opportunities that arise. And I think I forgot that when I got out of the military. I started to go on a tangent a totally different way. It took me years of figuring out that I can make it through these obstacles because I've been trained on making it through these obstacles. I've been trained not just in the military. I've been trained as a professional musician on making it through these obstacles. Because the one thing we did when I was a child was we practiced. We practiced all the time. I heard this just as much as I heard that I needed to become a doctor or a lawyer in order to be successful. I heard that practice makes perfect. It is one thing that stuck with me just as much as the hate stuck with me. That in order for me to get ahead, I had to keep doing it over and over and over again to get better at it. Why do you think I'm doing 52 weeks of these projects? Why do you think since 2016 I've been working on this whole project to help encourage others? Just like myself, help encourage others to get from point A to point B. Because when I was zero, when I went down to zero and had nothing, I lost faith in myself. And I noticed I gained more faith in myself as I climbed up that level, as I made it to become a scholar. I have much more faith in myself, much more faith in myself than I ever had. I know that I will succeed and build upon my dreams. And it's because of that self-confidence that I was able to look back and see how effective I was, how efficient I was, and how I had gained self-efficacy through using self-confidence to accomplish my goals, through believing in myself. That's what self-efficacy is all about. Knowing that I can get to that next point because I have the confidence to do so. That's the difference between the two. And we're going to keep talking about that as we go through the next two parts of this mindset course. The self-efficacy versus self-confidence. So what are your next steps? Well, let's make it easy on you. Practice makes perfect. That's you. Whatever you choose, you're going to have to practice it. You're going to have to keep going it over and over again through the tedium. Just keep breaking through. Right? Pace yourself. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier, and it just came straight out, right out of my mouth. So on the proximal development, pace yourself. Talking to, actually, it's a cohort member, friend too, but cohort member. We were on Slack, and they were actually talking about studying one of our new classes in a section. They were studying for a test, and they were like taking it in chunks, scaffolding. Talking about scaffolding and taking it in chunks, learning it in chunks. And as you learn it in chunks, you can move through and do what you need to do, right? Because you grow when you learn it in chunks. You learn this little bit, you get it down, you practice it, you get it down, then you can add into it. It's like, for instance, I do this on my Facebook sometimes. I go live and I'll be in the middle of playing Vader Immortal on Oculus. And while I'm playing Vader Immortal on Oculus, you can see that I'm just doing like moves. My arms are moving this way. I'm pulling through things in and swinging. I'm throwing a saber. I'm doing this and I'm going back and forth. But I'm doing all these things through a scaffold technique. You see, Vader Immortal comes in three. It comes in 3 episodes. The first episode in the dojo training, I'm not talking about the story of Vader Immortal, I'm talking about the dojo training. In the dojo training, the first dojo training, you learn how to use a lightsaber. You don't learn anything about the Force. They avoid the cognitive load or the cognitive overload by just showing you how to use your lightsaber, how to defend against attacks, how to swing a blade. In episode 2, you start to learn how to use the Force. You actually call for your weapon, reach out for it, and it comes to you. So in the first episode, you had to pick up your weapon from a pedestal. In the second episode, you reach out and you use the Force to draw it to you. And in that episode is a lot, in that dojo training of that episode, there's a lot of use of the Force. And you actually get to throw your lightsaber and call it back to you. So you learn how to use these techniques together. But as you go through the training, they give you different bots that gradually excel, and they scaffold up the stairs, like these stairs you're seeing in this, like the stairs you're seeing in these next steps right here. The stairs you're seeing in these next steps right here. And these stairs are the actual training scaffolds up the scale so that you get better and better. So it takes more thought. It takes more effort. It takes more process. And in order to go through that process, you got to build up the practice. The more you practice, just like in Vader Immortal, people think I'm just throwing stuff around. I don't know what I'm doing. No, I've practiced to get to that level to where I actually hear different things. My cognitive load is hearing things, seeing things, and sensing things through their movement around me. So even though it's in VR and I don't feel it kinesthetically, there's language from the movement that is kinesthetic, from the visual movement that triggers kinesthetic thought in my head. And I end up using kinesthetic movements by the way I swing the saber. But we are adaptable. So pace yourself. Scaffold it. the best way for us to be adaptable is to take it one step at a time. Or as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, take it one day at a time. Everything we do in life should be one day at a time. Once you pace yourself, go for what you know and lock it down. Lock it down. I'm excited for that one because you got to go for it. Like Nike says, just do it. Don't be like, oh yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that, but you never write it down. I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that, but you never think about the next steps it takes. I want to do that, I want to do that, but you never go for it and you never lock it down. Lock it down. Make it happen. Try. Because people say, oh yeah, you shouldn't just try, but if you think in your own mindset you're trying and that you're going to succeed through your trying, if that's what it takes, do it. If it takes for you to say, no, I must not try, I must do, then do it. But whatever it takes for you, go for it, lock it down. For me, it says, fail, 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 succeed. That's how it works for me. Because the more I fail, the more I succeed, the more I learn ways, the more I see and listen to God's answer. And with that being said, remember where you started. Don't forget where you started. Because once you remember where you started, you know where you're going. That's the only way you can make it through that zone of proximal development. You got to know where you're at. You got to understand where you're at and figure out where you're going. And remember where you're at, because you're going to have to go back to believing and going back to remembering where you started so that you can make it to the next point. Right? So, with that being said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to contact me. I want to thank you again for watching. You can always call me at 310-844-9285 and leave a message, text message, anything. If you have any questions, comments, and concerns, please do so. Or you can stop by docreo.com and leave a message on the message boards or check out any of the other videos I have up there. If you want to know about the references I use in here, like I said before, Mayer, Applying the Science of Learning. Richard Mayer, Applying the Science of Learning. It's one book. The other book I want to get into, and I didn't want to get into it too much because the author does get a little bit religious, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. The author takes this from the standpoint of religion, in a sense, but at the same time, a lot of these steps are real powerful, and they are some of the same steps that some of these thought mentors or thought creators or people who say that you can do more with your thought and your mind, The Secret. It's the same stuff. You got to keep digging in these books. Dig in these books as much as you can. And also, I definitely referred back to the Inverted Maslow's Pyramid by Manfrotto. You know, you can find that in the National Real Estate Investor Journal. And you can find both of these books on Amazon. If not, I have links in the description. Links in the description below. Matter of fact. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for more In the Hot Box with Doc Reo next week when we come back with the mindset to achieve. Self-efficacy versus self-confidence. Mindset to achieve. If you're going to believe, you got to retrieve it first. You got to believe it first, then you got to retrieve it next. But you most definitely got to start to achieve your goals so that you can feel the self-efficacy, so you can understand it and get past just self-confidence and make it to the next level. Stay tuned. And with that being said, I'm out of here. Stay tuned for more In the Hot Box with Doc Reo as I sign off. Peace. You know what time it is. If you or someone you know is having thoughts of harming themselves, please contact the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. And if you're a veteran of the armed forces, press 1 after dialing 1-800-273-8255.